we try to forge a path of originality and creativity. We kind of always go back to honesty and delivery, and we believe that even though the world's plagued with problems, we could be part of the solution. We believe that regardless of all the problems surrounding us, great design lifts us psychologically. And with that thought, we welcome growth over stagnation and the physical act of actually creating things over mental paralysis or playing computer games. So we're here tonight, just like you are, because we actually really love what we do. And I think that if everybody sort of returns to that mentality, you end up with creations like you're going to see tonight on the corner. We created something that was bold, it was dangerous, it was risky. It could have been received as something extremely positive or something extremely negative. But we've learned something in life as we've aged, which is if you really follow your heart and you're truly passionate about it, not only does the design get better with time and during the whole process, but others become engaged. If you firmly believe in it, you've reconciled the problems that are inherently born out of poor designs. And the solutions in the end up being far more rewarding than you can even anticipate, because again, the premise for everything that we do is born out of truth and honesty. And we'll always go back to truth and honesty because everybody doesn't have to love or like what we do. But if we're happy with what we do as the creators, I think that that's where you have to start. You can't start by pleasing others before you please yourself. With that, we're going to start our journey on Greenhouse.
And for those who aren't too familiar with the greenhouse, we're just going to run through a couple of drone shots that showcase the exterior, the facade, and take you inside to show, our effort in translating the kind of curvature and making a cohesive design from outside in. Also, if you're not familiar, we were working with an existing building, which we'll get into a moment, showing our site analysis. But you can see, like Peter was mentioning, the power of attraction, some of these kind of philosophies and design methodologies that we used to inform the form, in addition to the site and the massing. So here's a quick diagram just showing some of the things we were looking at. The fact that the building was oriented at the street corner was very unique. It was bookended by two towers. The curving facade, obviously very unique, all things that we wanted to capitalize on. And with the addition of a massive curtain wall system that just let light into the space, into a two-level space that we had to utilize. And here's just another aerial view of the building.
So on this slide, I want you to take a look at what's going on here. Over the years, this has been an homologation of multiple designs, multiple design ideas, and a morphing from traditional to postmodern to classical. It started out in the mid-'60s as a Sidney Epstein store. It was a flagship store, and it changed into a furniture store, a bank. It's had several lives, but this is what we were given. So for better or worse, this is kind of where Greenhouse started.
And another just perspective view of the existing building and diagramming some of the moves and gestures that we were thought of kind of in plan that translated to a perspective view. And a few things we'll get into, but about the curve, that it starts gently lifting off the ground and crescendoing at the center, creating the massive opening for the sunlight to bleed into the space and eliminating, so capitalizing on some of the good aspects of the existing geometry and eliminating, like Peter mentioned, some of the things that were either add-ons or did not belong to the kind of the intrinsic massing of the building. So hence removing the gable roof.
So stepping back is not necessarily a bad thing sometimes. It lends clarity to where you're going. If there are pieces and components that are worth saving, we save them. If they're not worth saving, we eliminate them.
Yeah, and from a retail perspective, the towers made sense as kind of these towers essentially for signage, but also, you know, our gesture was to increase the height of the towers to promote the signage and also to conceal some of the rooftop units that were going on in the space. And then you can see what was added actually through the process was a pleated texture across the facade, which was not originally there, but through the process of taking our sections, we wanted to, again, capitalize on kind of what we were doing already with the curve and, as mentioned earlier, use technology to our advantage to push the envelope, you know, beyond just an ordinary geometry.
So it would seem counterintuitive in retail architecture to obscure some of the windows, but we resisted the opportunity to put all the windows front and center on the street because we believed that it'd be more alluring to draw people in by obscuring some of the windows and creating that sense of anticipation rather than exposing it all, which is the knee-jerk reaction to typical retail architecture.
Gradient.
So now we want to talk about this form and what's going on with the gradients. Having the ability to use technology, and we're going to show how we actually use those tools in the next few slides. This might be an overly simplistic, quick, if you look at this quick view of what you think is going on here, that's actually far more complicated than it appears. The gradients of the lines that are sinuating up and down in this form actually change in height and dimension and decrease to zero. They go from a gradient of 0 where they touch the ground to an offset of approximately 6 inches. They increase in width and size as they decrease in dimension as they terminate towards the ground. So there's complex shapes going on here that are turning the corner, changing in gradients, and changing in size, form, and function. To try to communicate that in the past to a contractor or to a fabricator would have been a very difficult task. We're going to show you the tricks and things that we did that made this possible. But when you look at this, everything flows. It's kind of simple and easy on your eyes, but it's far from simple from the standpoint of complexity and erection and construction.
Yeah, and I think to Peter's point, it took a lot of iterations to arrive at this solution. You know, thanks to Peter always pushing to fine tune it, and you know, like he mentioned, it was either it could have been protruding too far at the top, or you know, the idea of it coming to a 0 point. Could we really execute that? Those are all elements that, you know, everyone knows it takes a team to kind of build something like this, and so we had to work with the contractor, with a budget, with the city, all these elements and aspects to come up with a design that was going to be buildable. And so what we're going to show you in a moment here is just the final iteration, but you know, we went through a lot of different tests. There's a longer version of this video online that you can look up if you just search our name and Skokie Greenhouse, but this essentially shows the Boolean effect to get the curved geometry. This is a quick look at kind of lofting the line geometry for each individual pleat, we'll call them, and the use of what was parametric design translating into our Revit program. Some of it was modeled in SketchUp, brought over to Revit. You just saw how we radiated the sections across the facade and how each of the panels are cut and individually numbered to be put onto the facade. So all of that information is translated into a drawing like this for the curve. It looks complex, but it's really only calling out the different elevations and plan and elevation to achieve the double curvature facade, which translates into our framing system. You saw in the video when we took the radial section slices, that was calculated on an arc radius of 16 inches so that we knew we were working on a framing template that the framers would use and would be sheathed accordingly, and that we can work on a 16, 32, 48 kind of modular for our foam pieces. So what you're seeing here is the skeleton before it was sheathed.
So the whole time this is going on, we're constantly checking and rechecking what we think is right, what's proportionally correct, and what the gradients should be. This is truly a project that kept changing until the end. And I don't mean changing from a standpoint that things fundamentally changed. It kept getting further refined by having these tools and applying them in the real world sense. We wanted to make everything as precise and accurate, but as buildable as possible. Without these tools, we would never have been able to convey to the contractor what our intent was. So we literally had to construct this in the virtual sense and the real sense together so that we could convey to the contractor how he was going to put this up. We all know that contractors are really only as good as the tools you give them, but these tools made it like an erector set for them and gave them the roadmap to a successful project. We're going to show you some slides where the contractor actually gets engaged. We're in the shop with the contractor. We're literally building the mock-up with them in their shop, CNC cutting the foam with hot wires and machines, and putting together the pieces in a numbering system so each section could be broken down into small segments and erected in the field exactly the way it was meant to be designed. So if you were to try to construct this in the field or rasp the foam in the field or leave it up to the installer in the field, the precision would be off and the project would fail dramatically. But by controlling the limits and the extents of each piece and knowing exactly what those pieces should be by numbering them and erecting them in this photograph, you could make the impossible possible. And not only make it possible, you could start creating even more complex designs and do it within budget because you're essentially giving them small segments of what your ideas are, and you're limiting how far they can go on their own before the constraints are put in place. So these images are a great example of how we thought through the actual physical implementation of all the pieces to make a concept a reality.
And the beautiful finish texture after it was sanded, rasped, and all the filler pieces were added is a plaster finish that it's more than just an EFIS finish, but it is a Stowe product that is one of their most advanced lines for our temperature and climate zone. So we know it's going to hold up, and it's actually it's finer than a sand grain finish. And so it looks plaster smooth, like drywall smooth. It's basically a level 5 plaster finish that these guys sanded, added, sanded to get it to this point where there's not a blemish visible from the human eye. And so and so Stowe, this was actually a research project for them. They took it upon themselves to reach out to us and use this as an example for the product to showcase what the product is capable of, and that it's more than just a rectilinear foam panel with reveals type of material. It can be used in combination with the foam and some of these new fabrication technologies or methods to produce something like this. And so here's just a couple of photos of the finished product.
And now we're going to take you inside the store, and Steve will walk you through the interior and the thought process in that evolution.
Yeah, so the idea for us, again, we had an existing building to work with, but when we were using these, the power of attraction and the experiential factor on the outside, it was important for us to translate that into the inside so we had a cohesive project. Fortunately, some of the forms did carry in, and so what you saw there was just the delineation between secure and unsecure areas. And here's a quick look at how we wanted to orient some of the interior spaces based on the window and the kind of double height space that you'll see in a moment. So we have the reception, and some of these things we did work with a team of interior designers to develop the idea of a check-in area, because this becomes more than just a place to buy recreational marijuana. It's also an education facility. And so we have educational zones with different little blocks and things like that, a demonstration area, and how we oriented the point of sale and the double height sales floor aligned with the double height window. Here's the material palette, excuse me, that was also developed with the team that strikes kind of a balance between familiarity, comfortable, cleanliness. And so, you know, the wood palette with the grass and the live wall, this is what it ends up looking like when it's all brought together on the inside. And so you can see the curvaceous stair. For us, it was kind of the big design moment that this stair wraps up and around and becomes the leading edge for the balcony. And here's a look at that with the green wall and the chandelier.
So we actually deconstructed forms that existed on that existing stair and accentuated the stair in its purest form by highlighting its serendipitous nature. So we cladded the walls with white plaster and really took full advantage of that free-flowing motion that takes you up to the second level. This is that last shot. Let's go back to that real quick. This last shot, you get the sense that you're not in a medical facility. The ambient light that's pouring in through the windows is muted by the film that's on the windows, so there's a soft glow. Everything about the environment is calming. And when you think of the product and its use and the connotations in the past with the product and its use, this is counterintuitive to that, because now it's all about the experience. It's addressing medical needs. It's addressing people arriving at this destination for all sorts of reasons, whether it be for people that are treating their cancer or epilepsy or glaucoma or recreational use. But again, the whole experience was meant to calm the consumer down and create a welcoming, inviting environment.
And leading up to the second level is designated for online pickups only, with a lounge area where we've got the built-in pleated bench that matches the material palette.
And now we look to the future. We're going to show you some images of where we're going. And this is an example of an event center that we're doing in Florida. It piggybacks on nature's forms. Those forms transcend onto the interior of the building, so the exterior and the interior become one.
So what we learned from the experience on Greenhouse was that experience and the power of traction is very important, and I think we all know that, to retail design. But for us, it was an opportunity to explore some of those methods and techniques and really start to translate them onto other building forms, other building typologies. And so the building shell here becomes kind of like a pair of hands that cup and protect the visitors and the viewers in the space. As Peter mentioned, it's a civic auditorium for the larger one, and this is a playhouse that utilizes the same shape but scaled down, which, again, with our technology, the capabilities of using the technology digitally, is that some of these forms can be scaled up and down in sort of a vector-based reality. And so this is on the boards for us, along with a couple other projects.
So this is an interesting project because this is going on right now. The above is the existing Caputos. The below was the Dominics from many years ago. What we're actually going to do on this project is deconstruct the building, go back in time, take advantage of the bowstring trusses in the form, and create this from what existed. So we're taking advantage of what the architects conceived of and thought of in the past, but making it relevant to the future and to today. It's interesting because this is a conventional grocer that's thinking outside the box, that's asking himself or asking us, how do I compete with Amazon? How do I compete with the bigger food chains? What should I do? And our recommendation to them is find what's right for you. If we can make you successful by introducing the public to your store before they actually enter the store, then we can attract new customers to your store. This end user does a phenomenal job inside the store. The love and attention paid to the product, the food, the presentation is without compare. What's lacking is the connection between the architecture and the user. What we hope to do is bring the two together so that the person that's driving by that never would have thought of visiting the store is now drawn to it.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback on what Peter just mentioned, there's a uniqueness to obviously the architecture, but it's not something that's necessarily conjured up on a blank sheet of paper, especially for examples like Skokie Greenhouse and now this, where we're utilizing the existing structure to enhance the forms, but also create this power of attraction and an experience that's unique to the tenant. And so, as mentioned before, we've got the power of these technologies and new ways to convey, mentioned the buildability, the constructability to the contractors. And so things like these animations or GIFs that show the buildup of all the components, they've become extremely important to how we discuss with the contractor and stay on budget. And here's another example of the same grocer with what will be their flagship store as a ground up. Again, utilizing forms that are unique to them, but that have a story and connect to them. The idea here was that this freeform canopy emulates the Tuscan hillsides, and it's got a curving form that lifts up at the entry and touches down gently at one of the sides. And here's an image of what's that starting to look like, an elevation.
And again, we're looking at a traditional grocer that you'd be hard pressed to believe that the traditional grocer would move outside their comfort zone to explore an idea like this. But kudos to them, because they realize that forward momentum in a market that's bifurcated by so many users is a path forward with their prosperity, their legacy. So they've trusted in us to do something that brings them a new identity and forges a path forward for them. But in doing so, we're not projecting our feelings or beliefs on them. We're drawing inspiration from them. And as Steve alluded to, this actually was born out of the idea of the Tuscan hillside. We started by looking at the history of the user, going back into their town in Italy, and then trying to use that metaphor as a platform to leap off of into the future. So with that, we are coming to the end, my friends, and we're going to go to the next slide. And this is pretty simple, but we're going to end where we began. A simple line, but what a beautiful line. A sketch more beautiful than anything ever created on a computer device. The heartfelt love of a child creating a drawing on a piece of paper with no reference to any photo or examples, but their imagination. So we all dare to explore without fear of failure. We find a path of truth and honesty forged in what we feel is right and not what others expect. What you've seen today has been a stepping stone for our journey. We're all on the same journey. And it's our hope that, as you spend time with us, we'll get to spend time with you and we'll get to look at your works. We think that every child is inherently born with this creativity, and it's only the child that is tapped down by hearing no that's pushed away from dreaming. We're dreamers in here, and I think everybody on this call has probably got a little bit of dreaming in them. And as I said earlier, this was not a promotion for Camburas Theodore, this is a promotion for all of us to do something better in a time where everybody's suffering. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much. We hope you've enjoyed this. It's been an honor and pleasure to present to you tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you both so much for the presentation. I do see we have a few questions. So Ed is asking if you guys know if the windows need to be frosted so the product is not visible from the exterior. Is this something you know, or?
Yeah, that's actually exactly the truth. And so it kind of served as a double purpose for us. It is a security film as well, and it's opaque so that you can't see into the store. And but it also did a great job because it's southern exposed at diffusing the light, like Peter mentioned. That one view looking back towards that window, it does not just physically create a sense of security, but also mentally, I think, for the people that are inside, while producing this sort of aura, the light that bleeds into the space in a diffused nature very beautifully.
Awesome. Another question I see, Chris is asking if that exterior wall curtain is always white, can be other color, like wood, for example.
Missed the first part of that. The exterior wall color, like the pleated facade, the curved facade.
Yes. If that has to be white, or it can be something else, another color.
So that's an interesting question, because when we started off, we were so bold that we actually picked a lime green. And we went with this a bright green. And when we realized that not only was it was disrespectful to the street and it was screaming loud, "Look at me," we felt that the form needed to be understated because it was so strong to begin with. So adding color to it only accentuated something that we're trying to downplay. We're trying to tell a story. We're trying to invite you in. We don't necessarily want to stop traffic. And
yeah, I can't say that there is, for those who are interested in the details, a color changing LED that's embedded in the underside of the curve, which was sort of our homage to the lost green color, but it can change color and give you a gradient in that manner.
But there's a purity to the white. And again, I think that we have a tendency as we get older and a little bit more sophisticated to want to pull back. There's a beauty in simplicity and understatement. And by adding color or being bold, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But a purest form, a clean, beautiful form, can stand on its own, such as this one does, without being too loud.
Okay. Another question, Melissa's asking if that Caputo store, is that in Wheeling?
No, that Caputo store is going to be in Norridge, and the remodel is going to be in Bloomingdale.
Awesome. And I think this question is for the design, actually, of that grocery store. So Katie is actually curious if there are any concerns with kids climbing on that. I know if you can go back to that picture, I know it was pretty low.
Yes, there are major concerns about that.
Yes.
It looks so fun. I want to climb up it. And I think that's that's the idea. Like what Peter was discussing earlier. I mean, there's a sense of innocence, and we know as architects, we know better than to actually let that thing come to the ground, that there's going to have to be some landscaping or railings around it. But, you can't start there. Those are kind of the effects. I mean, if you go over to Europe, they do have things touching the ground, and they do let you climb their buildings because it's just a lot, I don't know, it's different there. But we realize the realities and the restrictions and the safety factors that are embedded here. And yes, those will be incorporated into the design accordingly.
And there's a steep gradient there. So even though it looks very approachable and that you can walk up it as you approach it, the last gradient on that curve is almost perpendicular to the ground. So you'd have to be a good rock climber to get up it.
Yeah.
But the fact that you're kind of looking at that and it's alluring you to the building, it's successful. Our bigger concern is all that snow going to come down on you? So we're working through all those issues, and we're going to resolve every issue, whether it's snow related or people climbing it. But we have considered those things.
Awesome. And now another question from Chris regarding the greenhouse store. What was your biggest lesson there? And I'm assuming there were a lot of challenges with regulations and the neighborhood, but is there like a lesson that you want to share, or like what was the biggest challenge, I guess?
Get in fast.
Yes. Follow your heart as quick as possible and execute as quick as possible. If this had been studied too long or thought about too long, it probably would have never happened. Sometimes in life, timing works to your advantage and sometimes it doesn't. When I say it worked to our advantage, we had the benefit of a lot of momentum on our side. The world hadn't collapsed. Everybody was happy. Things were happening. And we took that positive energy and used that with our presentation with the village, with the presentation with our client, and with the tools that we had. Had a month gone by, this project would have never happened. And that corner, I don't know what the corner would have looked like today, or if much would have happened to the corner. So the lessons we learned were, if you have a good idea, be able to share that idea, be able to communicate that idea, move on that idea, and don't be paralyzed by your ideas. Don't fear failure. But you need to also think through your concepts. The beauty of the sketches that were created here were we were able to vet every issue and have answers. Just as the caller asked about Caputo's, we've been able to analyze. Nothing here was created in a vacuum. Nothing was created without us virtually flying around it and analyzing it up until the day the store opened. So the lessons learned are, as I said, follow your heart, move on it quickly, and convey your ideas succinctly with precision.
Yeah, I would say that surprisingly not as many technical lessons learned as we may have expected, just because, like Peter mentioned, we had the tools, but the lesson learned would be on top of moving quickly to get approvals and everything, is to work together as a team. We had a very defined budget for this project, and we had a contractor selected for the project. And had we not sat down with them to understand what their capabilities were and what these things were going to cost, again, things could have gotten value engineered very quickly out of this. But because we had a method, because we had a technique that was approachable and understandable through the drawings, and again, that's just where, being architects as we are, we're in the business of communicating, drawing buildings. And, we've got the technology and we need to utilize that. So lessons learned is to be very clear and concise about what you want and how you're going to get there with the team.
See, the other thing that we learned is that we were able to quantify the budget, stick to the budget, and execute on that budget in a timely fashion. So we checked off all the boxes as if we were building this from scratch. And we worked with the contractors from start to finish so that nothing ever went awry. We didn't share this during our presentation, but what really was beautiful about the experience was that the contractors in the field were in love with what they were doing. And we don't see that too often, that the contractors actually enjoy their tasks. But they were on the corner putting this together, and as they were putting it together, people would come by and honk and high-five them, and they felt this engagement that is unique in our industry. And I think that what that tells us is if there's a love of the craft and people are enjoying the experience, that the end product is better. So, I mean, they were out there on Saturdays and Sundays. They were doing what was ever necessary to get this project done. And they were wiping down things with their shirts if they had to wipe it down. And we just didn't see that. The other thing that we did is we don't consider our work great. We consider our work something that has to be evaluated and measured by how people perceive it. We actually sat across the street and talked to people just as a matter of fact to get their impression. What do you think of this? How do you like it? And the resounding support for the transformation of this corner was a pleasant surprise, because when you're asking people off the cuff what they think about something, you could get all kinds of answers like this is a monstrosity, that we don't like this. But the general response was really positive. People were happy to see this change. They were happy to see that it didn't mirror what was going on the other corners, that it was a departure, and it was a departure in an honest way. This was not created anywhere else that we never know about. We haven't seen this architecture anywhere else, and it goes back to we were inspired by a form, a function, a client, and we used a roadmap to arrive at the solution. We didn't arrive at the solution by stealing ideas from other corners. The solution was born out of the problem and a lot of other factors, and that's sort of unique in retail architecture again, because retail architects tend to be very formulaic and tend to borrow from what they've seen as the latest flavor of the week. What happens with that is the shelf life of what's being done today is transient and disposable. We showed you examples of earlier works to show that when those works were created out of a desire to solve a problem and not a desire to necessarily just please ourselves, that they stand to test the time. And we're hoping this happens as well, that this is there for a while and that it's not torn down or remodeled. But again, it was solving a problem and not necessarily stealing from another location.
Awesome, thank you. So what I would do, I do see that there's a couple more question. Matt, I see that you have a question. So instead of me reading the question, maybe if you want to just ask the question yourself.
Yeah, guys, thank you. Great presentation. Could you speak a little bit in regards to, security, deliveries, obviously the sensitive nature of the facility itself, and did that influence the interior design, the floor plan, and your interior configuration? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, it did. And so are you asking what time the deliveries are done and what the security code is? Because we can't divulge that information. But
no.
Oh, just joking.
But if you have that.
Yeah, this slide kind of speaks to that. I mean, it was relatively simple to kind of split these sections. This happens at every store. They've got kind of these three zones, which are the unsecured area where a visitor comes in, gets their ID checked, and then is allowed into the store. That's shown in red. The actual sales floor itself, where once you're in, you're free to move about and study and look at the product. That's the green zone. And then the blue is back of house, where there are key card access for all the employees. And you can see that's basically behind the point of sales and wraps around to the north side, the top of the drawing, which is where the deliveries are made. And so the two towers function as the entry point for both the visitor on the southwest or the west facing facade and the pink or fuchsia color, and the blue entry tower at the north for deliveries.
Great, thank you very much.
I don't know if there's any other questions. I guess you guys can just ask. This is by appointment only, right? Maybe I should know. So you make an appointment, that's how you can go inside the building?
No, you can
no.
actually,
Well, with COVID, I don't know now, but
well, they check your ID on the outside and then you can enter the building. One of two things happen. You can pre-order your product so it's ready for you, or you can enter into the store, look at the displays and pick out what you like. There's people inside the store to assist you with your purchase, to explain to you how certain things can be used. So there's a lot of novel things that are going on inside the store. I don't know all the nuances of it all because I can't say that I go in and frequent the place very much. But it's set up to be educational and beneficial, and depending on your desire to get your product quick or slow, like I said, you're checked out on the outside, brought into the inside, and you're either escorted to the point of sale on the first floor or pre-orders on the second floor.
I live about 5 minutes away from this building, and I pass by it so many times, but I'm so embarrassed to say that I haven't been inside yet. So it was so great to see the interior of the building and how, it's really meant to be calming and recreational. So I will definitely go see it if anyone can go with appointment or without.
Nice try, Maria. We know you go there regularly.
Well, a lot of you were asking for samples. Unfortunately, we couldn't send you any samples. But the first time I go there, I'll promise I'll get something. Any other questions from anyone? I know we have people that aren't from this area. So did we convince you to come see the building? I'm assuming yes.
I'm going to check it out. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so hopefully the next event will be in person. And
well, you can buy your product here and you can go to the restaurants across the street. It's like a one-stop destination.
yeah, for
It's
sure.
it's interesting because the world's changing, right? And I don't know, we didn't set out to necessarily mimic a marijuana leaf or have a prescribed image of what this building should look like. We wanted to be a little more sincere with our form. And again, I don't think we tailored it to necessarily broadcast what was going on in the building. Our goal was to create an art form on the corner.
yeah, and because we didn't, like Peter mentioned earlier, when we were standing at the street corner asking people what they thought of it, it was, yeah, it's different. It's cool. It looks like a curtain is being lifted, and so actually we were interviewed by Blair Kamen before he left the Tribune just now, and that was also one of his questions was, was it intended to be that you're lifting the curtain on an otherwise, concealed industry, and we said no, not at all. It happens to look like that, but for us, it was really about the power of attraction, creating experience, and we were really influenced by the existing form of the building, and it was just an evolution that came to this point. So there was no prescribed form, sculpture, something that we were trying to mimic. It really was just kind of the result of all these problems that accumulated to this result.
One question I have, I was just thinking about it. So I know Greenhouse opened quite a few actually stores around here. I believe we have about 7, like very close to each other. I know there's one in Norbrook, which is super close to this one. There's another one in Deerfield. And this is the only one that's a flagship location. And I think this is the largest one, although the other ones are also pretty big. But do you know why they chose this location to be more of a flagship special location and not the rest? And again, I haven't seen the rest of the location, so I don't know, only from the outside, but I don't know if they are, this is the only one that's flagship, right?
Correct. And I think that the location was based on car counts across the street from Old Orchard Mall. destination, proximity to other locations. It is in a really good location when you consider you're adjacent to Skokie, Evanston, Northbrook. The proximity is just amazing. But when you consider you have one of the first planned, most successful malls across the street, that doesn't hurt traffic flow either. And then as far as it being a flagship store, that was kind of an evolution of the space that they were inheriting, the size of the space, and what to do with that space. So unlike their other stores that were one-story, single-story buildings, this was a multi-story building, and the approach had to be different than a Northbrook or Deerfield.
Awesome. Any other questions or any comments? Overall, everyone likes the design. We convince people to come to Skokie to see it in person.
Thank you again for having us tonight. Hopefully we didn't bore everybody, and it was a pleasure.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you all. Thank you all very much. Thank you for presenting, and thank you to everyone who attended. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. We will have, hopefully this recording works. It looks like it does. And we can share it maybe after. We'll talk about it, like how to share it, because I'm pretty sure it will be pretty long in a large file. So we'll probably put it somewhere, maybe YouTube or something, and share it with everyone.
All right, thank you so much again. Appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And hope to see you all at our next event.
Cheers. Yeah, thanks, everybody. See ya.
Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maria, don't look so serious.
You're still on. Do you want to still, we have to get together for, should I wait?
Stop the recording.
Oh, yes, that's a good idea.